Brian had a lot of fun. I think we ought to do that more often. Jerry has flu type A, he said. And I don't know what that means, but I think the A stands for awful, because that's how it makes you feel. There are several out with flu and just sick, and so we just need to be mindful of them. We have some that are back who have been sick. Don't drink the water, because you're either going to get the flu or you're going to get pregnant, and you don't want either one. I warned you about that last week. Hey, I do want to let you know that Alpine Church of Christ in Longview, Texas, just about an hour away, is hosting a disciple-making workshop February 21st and 22nd. There's already a group of us that are planning on going. We're going to go over Friday, come back Friday, go over Saturday, come back Saturday. But if that is something that interests you, please let me know. We'd love for you to go along with us. Now, if you opened your bulletin to your outline, you see a bunch of lines, and you know what Jerry says about a sermon that doesn't have any points? It's pointless. So hopefully we'll get something out of today's lesson, something you can take home with you and apply to your faith and life this week. I'm really excited. I got to tell you, I'm excited about this year. I'm excited about the direction in which our church is moving. There just seems to be a growing enthusiasm for evangelism. There seems to be an awakened desire for discipleship, to love and save the lost and to love and mature the saved. I'm excited about our discipleship class on Sundays. I'm excited that university is going to be a Stand to Reason outpost, and you're going to hear more about that next Sunday. I believe that there are things going on in our congregation that just have a ripple effect, and it's just moving throughout our congregation, and I just expect something awesome from our church this year. I'm excited about our theme for this year, which will be revealed next Sunday on Dream Sunday. Next Sunday, come at 8:30, have breakfast. There's going to be a ministry fair. You can mill around in that ministry fair, sign up to serve. We're going to have Bible classes at 9:30. We're going to have worship right here at 10:30. And then following worship, we're all going to go eat together in the gym. It's going to be a big day, an exciting day. I want you to come. But I believe that our theme for this year is just going to help us be a great commandment, a great commission church. And I'm excited about that. Just excited to watch God's wonder and power as He works through us. And isn't that what Christianity should be all about? Excitement and enthusiasm to live in God's will and purpose. Being Christians is not just something that we do on Sundays within these walls. It's something that we do every minute of every day as we go. It's a daily walk with Christ, and it can be an unforgettable walk. So there are some walks of life that people never forget. A bride never forgets her walk down the aisle. A child never forgets that first walk to the principal's office. I still remember mine. Bobby League. Oh, we tormented our 5th grade teacher, that sweet little old lady. And she sent us, I got in a lot of trouble because of Bobby. It's his fault. A graduate never forgets their walk across the stage. And you can think of other walks that you've made that you'll never forget. I'll never forget a 4-mile walk I made for help when I got my youth group lost in the mountains of Colorado. And I just got to tell you, Teenagers are awesome. They are awesome because we had a God-sent guide that we ran into in the mountains of Colorado. And we opened the map, he showed me that we're 2 days off course and we're on our last meal. The Last Supper took on a whole new meaning. But he said, hey, you can go down this 4-mile trail to the ranger station. The ranger can take you all the way around the national forest, the national park, to your van. You can drive all the way back around and your gang can hike out tomorrow. And so that's exactly, it wasn't a walk, it was more of a sprint. I sprinted down that 4-mile trail, frantic, got the ranger, we drove around, I got the van, drove back around, slept in the van that night, and at the crack of daylight, I was headed back up that hill. And let me tell you, I thought I was going to come to a group of teenagers that were trembling with fear, huddled in their tents. But no, they're having the time of their lives. This guide had shown them what you can eat that's wild and what you can't eat. And they didn't even notice that I came back. So much for being the hero. Teenagers are just too cool. Now, the Bible also has a list of unforgettable walks. God walked in the cool of the garden. There was that excruciating walk that Abraham made with his son Isaac on the road to Mount Moriah. There was the liberating walk that Moses made with the Israelites when they crossed the Red Sea. And can you imagine what that must have been like? And it was followed by a frustrating 40-year walk in the desert. There was Joshua's triumphant walk around Jericho. The disciples' illuminating walk on the road to Emmaus. There was Paul's interrupted walk to Damascus. And there was the walk that was so sad and holy that it received its own name. It's the walk that Jesus made from the Praetorium to Golgotha. And it's called Via Dolorosa, the way of great sorrow. But perhaps the most unforgettable walk was taken by Peter the day he got out of the boat and walked on the water. It's unforgettable because of what he was walking on and who he was walking with. He was an ordinary person engaged in an extraordinary act of trust. And just like Jesus called Peter, he also calls us to get out of our boat, leave behind the safety and comfort zones of our lives, and realize the extraordinary opportunity for a spiritual adventure and faith from walking on water with Jesus. So if you have your Bibles, and I hope you do, or your phone, you're going to need them today. I invite you to turn to Matthew 14, and we're going to begin in verse 22. Matthew wrote, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not fear." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came to Jesus. And when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when he got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Well, right before this story in Matthew, we have the feeding of the 5,000. Now, Jesus had just been given the news that about the death of John the Baptist. John the Baptist, his cousin, John the Baptist who prepared the way for him, John the Baptist who baptized him. And what Jesus was actually trying to do at the time is he was trying to get away alone by himself to pray and I believe to grieve. But a huge crowd of people heard where he was going and they followed him. And when Jesus saw them, he had compassion on them and he did what Jesus does. He loved them and he healed the sick. A little later, the disciples are like, hey, Jesus, it's getting late. And he send everybody home so they can get something to eat. And Jesus says, why don't you feed them? And they're like, we got 5 loaves of bread. We got a couple of fish. But you guys know the rest of that story, that everybody ate. Everybody was full, and that there were lots of leftovers. After that, Jesus sent the disciples off in the boat. He dismissed the crowd so they could go home. And finally, he had time to be alone to pray and grieve. Meanwhile, things on the boat aren't going so well. Now, Peter and some of the other disciples, they had been on boats all of their lives. They would have been accustomed to big waves, but this time was different. They were getting beat up by the waves by a violent wind. And the Greek lends a little better description: tormented, disturbed, tossed by the waves. All these seasoned fishermen could do was to hang on tight and pray that the wind would die down. They were probably wishing the boat was a little bigger, the sides were a little higher, the wood was a little thicker. Imagine the size of the waves, the strength of the wind, the darkness of the night. Then realize these were the conditions under which Peter got out of the boat. It'd be tough enough to try to walk on water when the sun is bright, the wind and the water are calm. Imagine trying to do it when the waves are crashing. The wind is at gale force. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You thought you just saw a ghost and you're terrified. Put yourself in Peter's place for a moment. The Lord is inviting you to go on the adventure of your life, and you're scared to death. What would you choose, the water or the boat? The boat's safe, secure, comfortable, I guess, as it could be. You're with other people in the boat. The water is dangerous. The water is risky. You're going to be by yourself when you get out of the boat. Not to mention that walking on water goes against every law of nature. If you get out of the boat, there's a good chance you might sink. You might just drown. But if you don't get out of the boat, you'll never walk on the water. So the question for all of us is, what's your boat? Well, your boat is whatever represents safety and security. Whatever you're tempted to put your trust in when life gets a little rocky. Your boat is whatever keeps you so comfortable that you don't want to give it up, even if it means joining Jesus on the water. Your boat is whatever pulls you away from the walk of extreme discipleship. Leaving your boat may be the hardest thing you ever do, but if you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. So let's look at the one who got out of the boat. The disciples think Jesus is a ghost and they're terrified. But Jesus is like, hey guys, it's me. Calm down. It's going to be okay. And so Peter, of course, is the first one to jump into action, and he calls out to Jesus for an invitation. Lord, if it's you, tell me, command me to come to you on the water is what Peter says. Now, don't you love that? It wasn't, let me swim to you, let me jump in the water and swim to you. Now, Peter's going to do that later when he sees Jesus. And I tell you, there might just be a lesson right there for us. Are we asking Jesus to command us, to tell us to do something that will require great trust in Him, maybe to do the impossible? But Jesus says to Peter, come on. So Peter goes to the side of the boat. Can't you just see the other disciples? They're just watching closely. Is he really going to do this? He puts one leg over the side, puts the other leg over the side of the boat. He's gripping the edge of the boat with determination, with white knuckles, and then he lets go. And for the first time in history, an ordinary human being is walking on water. I can imagine that Peter just can't believe it, that he's beaming with delight. I bet Jesus is so proud of his student. He's just thrilled by him. Can you imagine Jesus' smile, perhaps his laughter, as he watches Peter walk towards him? I mean, it'd be like a parent watching his baby take his first steps. And I wonder how many steps he had to take to get to Jesus. Because it says he came to Jesus. For a few moments, was he so fixed on Jesus that he was oblivious to the waves crashing around him and to the wind that was blowing. Unfortunately, it doesn't last, as we know. Peter saw the wind, as Matthew wrote. He became afraid. He began to doubt, and his focus shifted from the Savior to the storm. And so began the battle between faith and fear. Let me share with you a truth about water walking. The fear will never go away. Each time you want to have a daring and courageous faith, it will involve going into uncharted waters, stepping into the unknown, facing new challenges. And each time you do, you're going to experience fear. As a boy growing up, going through a Timothy class at church, I remember our preacher, Gary Beecham, and we all had Gary on this pedestal. Gary Beecham, our preacher. And he was talking to us about preaching. And this is a man who has spent all of his life in front of an audience. And he says every time he gets up to preach, he still gets nervous. And I'm thinking, I know how he feels. But fear will never go away. But God gives us the courage to face it and overcome it, even though fear still lingers. As a result of seeing the wind, giving in to fear, Peter began to sink. Do you think Peter failed? His faith wasn't strong enough. His doubts were stronger. He saw the wind. He started thinking, I can't do this. What was I thinking? And he took his eyes off of where they should have been, and he sank. I want you to know that God did not lose his power that day. Faith did not fail that day. Peter exchanged his faith for fear, and he sank. And you know, we're hard on Peter for lacking faith. We shake our heads at Peter. But you know, I'm thinking at least he had the spiritual guts to get out of the boat. I think the real failure was the 11 who stayed in the boat. The decision to grow in faith always involves a choice between risk and comfort. And that's hard for us because we're creatures of comfort. We like comfort. We want to snuggle up with comfort on the couch and just be a potato there. Maybe you've seen that commercial where this couple binge watches every season of some show. And at the end of the commercial, their hair's a mess, their clothes are all tangled and twisted. The man's grown a full beard. I don't think the woman did, but the man grew a full beard with popcorn all stuck in it. I have to be careful when it comes to comfort, because that could easily be my boat. I suppose the 11 disciples weren't couch potatoes. We'll call them boat potatoes. They just sat there watching from their seats in the boat. I have no doubt that they could have stepped out onto the water and walked on water as well, but they didn't. And I think they failed unnoticed and uncriticized. After all, who can blame them for not stepping out into the water in the middle of a storm? But I can't help but think of what the 11 missed. Only Peter knew the thrill of walking on water. Only Peter knew the glory of taking Jesus' hand when he is in desperate need and Jesus lifting him up out of the water. Peter knew in a way the others could not that when he sank, Jesus would be able to save them, to save him. Peter had this unbelievable experience with Jesus. And as a result, he had a trust in Jesus that none of the other 11 disciples could know. They couldn't because they didn't get out of the boat. The failure is not to sink in the water. The failure is not to get out of the boat. And I'm afraid that too many times I fail to step out of my comfort, of my security, of my boat, and I've missed out on experiencing the faithfulness and the glory of God. Jesus is looking for disciples who will get out of the boat. Each time you get out of the boat, you'll become a little more likely to get out next time. It's not that fear goes away, but you know what? You realize that fear doesn't have the power to stop you. In 1 John chapter 5 and verse 4, John wrote, "Faith is the victory that overcomes the world." Faith overcomes our fears. Faith is greater than our fears because God is greater than our fears. Failure does not shape you. It's the way you respond to failure that shapes you. If you step up to the plate, you may strike out. It's my understanding that all the great hitters of Major League Baseball failed 2 out of 3 times. They struck out 2 out of 3 times. And I got to tell you, when I played Little League Baseball, I hated batting. I was afraid I was going to get hit by a pitch. I was afraid I might strike out. I was afraid that everybody might laugh at me. However, one of my most memorable moments of my Little League career was at a night game, and it was my turn to bat. I stepped up to the plate. I swung that bat. I hit that ball up into the lights of the field, headed towards the center field fence. I'd never hit an out-of-the-park home run, let alone the center field fence. Everybody were on their feet. I know my dad was straining with every muscle in his body to help wheel that ball over that fence. I was frozen. I didn't even start running to first base because I was in awe. It was as if it was all in slow motion. Back, back, back. And then it fell just short of the center field fence and into the glove of the center fielder and out. My greatest hit in my Little League life wasn't even a hit. Didn't even count. It was an out. But it was one of my greatest moments, and I tell you what, I couldn't wait for my next at-bat. Sir Edmund Hillary made several unsuccessful attempts to climb Mount Everest before he ever succeeded. After one attempt, he stood at the base of the giant mountain and he shook his fist at the mountain and he said, I am going to defeat you yet because you're as big as you're going to get, but I'm still growing. And every time he climbed, he failed, and every time he failed, he learned, and every time he learned, he grew. And then finally came the climb where he didn't fail again. Let's get out of the boat. I believe there are many good reasons to get out of the boat, but the one that trumps them all is that the water is where Jesus is. The main reason Peter got out of the boat is because that's where Jesus was. Peter wanted to be with Jesus, and that's why you get out of the boat, to be with Jesus. And I love at the very end, verse 33, I loved what resulted from this act of faith and even a lack of faith. It says, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Whether you walk on water, whether they stayed in the boat, Jesus was revealed, and they worshiped him. I want to encourage all of us to get out of our boat, join Jesus on the water, and experience a walk of faith that you'll never forget. If you're here this morning and we can pray with you, if you're ready to put on baptism and begin an unforgettable walk with Christ, we can do that too. Whatever your need, come as we stand, as we sing.